reading is from Romans 13, 8 through 10. Actually, this is from Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle and set apart to proclaim the good news. Oh, no one, anything, except to love one another, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you should not covet. And any other commandment are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law.
Years ago, I told a member in discernment, a student preparing for ministry, be careful about sharing your pulpit, for I had learned my lesson. Because on a return trip from Nicaragua with a group of college students, the custom was to sort of let them have the sermon and reflect upon what they had learned during the trip, and also just to reflect in general. And one of the students did it. She stirred up a hornet's nest. And it was my fault. Because, not that I had shared the pulpit, but one of our activities as we were preparing for the trip and just some of the themes we were thinking about that year included reading the book, Lies My Teacher Told Me, which is now, since 1995, sold about 2 million copies. And she talked a little about the book. Then after worship, a church member grabbed me by the arm, pulled me to the side and said, "Is that one of those leftist books that you found at some odd publisher?" And I said, "Actually, you can find it at the bookstore just down the street," which was an independent bookstore, but sort of the likes of Barnes & Noble, if you will. And I said, "I bet there's probably 4 or 5 copies on the shelf." "Well, I'll go see." Sometimes you have to be careful about sharing the pulpit. But I say that half-heartedly because it's new perspective, new understanding that makes us grow. Now, some would say that love is easy if we just remember the 10 Commandments and move on with our lives. So I put it to the test one Sunday in another congregation. For during the children's moment, I asked the children to give a quiz to the congregation, and they passed out note cards numbered 1 through 10 on each card. And then I said, your homework to do now, it's a pop quiz, is to write down the 10 Commandments. Well, none of us did well. But I thought I was the best because I had really worked hard over the past week to memorize them in the correct order so I could quickly snap them off. And so I said, and there you have it. And then Lily looked up at me and said, you forgot 2 of them. And then I looked at the congregation and they knowingly agreed with her. I had forgot the one about not stealing and honoring one's parents, which led another child to say, "Are you a thief? Do you not love your parents?" But you got the point, I hope, that as much as we say that we live our lives by the 10 Commandments, sometimes we don't remember all of them. And I'm not saying you need to do that, or if you need to post the 10 Commandments in your home or on the walls of a building, but it is sometimes, it's the easy way to say, well, if we do these, we show love. But then we are countered by what Paul writes, that love does no harm to a neighbor. I think it raises the ante a little bit. Yes, if you do the 10 Commandments, you do not cause harm. But I think sometimes in our lives, we should confess omission. Things that we should have done or said, or sometimes our lack of understanding or knowledge. In 1923, at the General Synod of the United Church of Christ, it was the last synod that John Dorhauer would be serving as the general minister and president of our denomination, and John is the same one that visited us in 2023 as well. He asked the question of the delegates and the visitors of the meeting is, how many of you have taught confirmation that there are 4 streams that make up the United Church of Christ? The Congregationalist, the Christian churches, the Evangelical, and the Reformed. Many stood, raised their hands in agreement. And then he said, well, we should all ask for forgiveness and confess. That we, perhaps unknowingly, perhaps by just simply omission, we have left out the 5th stream. And that 5th stream is what we are calling now the Afro-Christian stream or the Afro-Christian Convention. And now I feel guilty a little bit because the Afro-Christian Convention has its roots deep in Virginia and North Carolina, and I knew nothing about it. I'd done what many folks in the United Church of Christ had done over the years and sort of grouped all those in people of color in what was the Southern Convention. The convention that the Congregationalists were working really hard to establish before the merger, a conference or a convention for African American people. But as we came together, those 4 streams, as we would like to call them, we had lumped all together the Afro-Christian Convention into the Congregationalist movement. Now, yes, it seems to fit at times because the Congregationalists were abolitionists primarily. Those were the ones that established the Underground Railroad, worked to make slaves free, were the people of the Amistad with the attorneys that stood up for those who had been captured as slaves. Yet, in 1957, as we were forming as a denomination, in the spirit of unity, we collapsed that tradition into those 4. But John wanted us, and now to confess even still, that the worldview, the impact of the Afro-Christian conventions, are not just appropriately represented under the Congregationalist stream of the United Church of Christ. Because the Afro-Christian Convention, having its roots all the way back somewhat to the founding of Jamestown in Virginia, but by lumping it into the Congregationalist vision, we were leaving it up to white folks to tell the story of folks of African descent. For you see, the Afro-Christian Convention was born from a wellspring of independent black churches with deep African rootedness, which is rightly understood and at last shared as a unique stream. Now, I must tell you, in 2025, during confirmation, we told the story of the 5th stream, which may, for many churches, may be the first time or the second or third time since our General Synod meeting. But I do believe that sometimes within our own histories, we have to love beyond that history. Sometimes we didn't know. Sometimes it was just easier to put that together. But sometimes we as a nation and as a people must love beyond our history. Now we may roll our eyes at books like Lies My Teacher Told Me, but it's the truth. It makes us uncomfortable. It makes us sort of squeamish. But in all our attempts to revise history back to what we thought was true, does a disservice to all of us. To roll it back into something that makes it more easy to swallow and gets us off the hook doesn't really do justice to love. Perhaps there's an 11th commandment. Thou shalt not omit. Amen.